Welcome to Refurbishing Solidarity, where our focus is on defragging tech activism together. Thanks for joining us for part 3. If you missed part 2, you can find a link in the description. This definitely demonstrates a big shift in the way that a lot of people have thought about kind of tech workers, because there's a lot of glorification of the concept of the entrepreneur who comes and has a brilliant idea and then leads the charge, and everyone just falls in line behind that one person. Do you feel like Kickstarter continuously had a culture that was more about including everyone's voices, or do you feel like that was a particular change that had to happen in order to get people feeling comfortable with unionizing?
Oh, interesting. So I think there are two parts to that. I do think that there was emphasis on having people's voices heard, but as Meredith Whitaker said in a project that we collaborated on, she said that having a voice and having power are different things. And I think that was very apparent at Kickstarter, where you would voice an idea and maybe that idea would even get some interest. But whenever it reached the very top, for some reason it was, shot down, or even very, very, I think, obvious things. Like we had an anonymous reporting tool where you could report harassment or abuse, and that was taken away and staff didn't really know why. And we asked over and over again to have that reinstated, or to have a new tool that is an anonymous reporting tool brought in for people to feel safe, and we continuously were shot down by HR. So I think that's an example of HR would say, like, hey, tell us your ideas, tell us how we can improve the workplace, but changes were never actually made, and people who pushed too hard were punished. And I wouldn't say that they were pushing too hard, but the people in charge would,
And would you be one of those that then pushed too hard?
So a large portion of our organizing committee was fired in the same week, basically. Okay. So 3 people out of, I think, 5 or 6 at that point. And 2 of us were the 2 people who pushed really hard about a year earlier for an anonymous reporting tool, and that was me and another person. So I wouldn't say that directly led to retaliation, but I think it's the culmination of all of those moments where we pushed back on management and management didn't like it. I think another thing that we did that I would not suggest anyone do is we gave management a lot of second chances and third chances and fourth chances. We definitely, at the beginning of the union effort, we thought that we would get voluntary recognition. We thought that management would be supportive, and they would even be excited to be like part of this moment for tech. And we couldn't be more wrong. and I think that perspective of thinking that management would be on our side was somewhat of a setback and put a lot of us in danger.
When do you feel it was obvious that they were against you?
So I personally had a moment very early on in the union drive that I swore up and down was union busting. But I think it was just subtle enough that most of the organizers wouldn't have characterized it that way. But a couple weeks before we decided to go public, and maybe 2 weeks before we knew that management knew that we were organizing, management had an all hands. It was a very different all hands than all the other all hands we had since our new CEO came in, Perry. In this all hands, they promised us that anonymous reporting tool that I mentioned to you before. They said that they would have new clear growth paths, and they also told us that the company financial situation was pretty precarious. It was so transparent that we were excited to get that information. We were excited to know how the company was actually doing, so that we could take that into account. But I had this weird sense in the back of my mind that these were all sort of addressing points that we had been discussing in the union and in our outreach conversation. And that's when I thought management was going to start fighting us, as they were already presenting the idea of making concessions and presenting the idea of giving us, throwing us bones to take steam out of the union effort, and to say these problems that the union's talking about, we're addressing them, or they don't exist. So that was the first moment when I thought, this seems like they could be fighting us.
Do you think that the decision to fire you ended up helping or harming the movement of the union building?
The firings came, I think both management and the organizing crew were exhausted by the time the firings happened. And I think the firings were a way for management to easily send a signal that they don't like the union, which they had been doing for months, and sort of chill the unionizing effort and honestly sow fear. But I think also they were just looking for any way they could to stop this thing that they could not stop from happening. And by getting rid of 3 prominent active union organizers, I think that was an easy way for them to do that. And they were exhausted. The union as well was super, super tired and demoralized because we had gone through months and months of daily tension. It felt like we were at this weird boiling point that never subsided for months through the summer. And and so the firings helped re-energize the organizing committee, which I think was very, very important. But at the same time, something that you would think would happen did not happen. We thought that the firings were a very obvious signal to the rest of the company that management was retaliating and being anti-union. And there were quite a few people that were either pro-management or on the fence that thought that it was ambiguous, weren't quite sure what the firings meant. And so in that way, I don't believe that the firings helped organize. I don't believe that the firings helped the entire staff come together in this miraculous moment where we all saw behind the curtain. I don't think it was like that, but I do think it gave fuel to the organizers.
Thanks for joining us for part 3. Join us next week for part 4, where we will talk about the positive things that the union has been able to do to support the workers who've been organizing and the ways that Clarissa sees it could help in the future. Join our Patreon to get early access to full interviews and to join our Discord discussions. Please help this series by spreading it and interacting with your algorithms. And remember, a conversation is the first step towards solidarity.